Good evening and welcome to the Tuesday, October 22nd, 2024 study session of the Olympia City Council. For the record, we have a quorum with, I believe, Councilmember Gilman will be joining us remotely this evening. Is Councilmember Gilman on? Okay, so he'll be joining us momentarily. Our first item on our agenda this evening is item 2A, which is a discussion of a public engagement process to consider how to address minimum wage, fair scheduling, and workplace safety. So just to kick us off and get us started with this agenda item, I'd like to turn it over to our Chair of Finance, Councilmember Parsley.
Thank you, Mayor. As with the mayor's announcement a couple of weeks ago, I thought it would be appropriate for me as chair to make a statement. As the chair, I wrote this because I wanted it to be clear, so bear with me as I read it. As the chair of Finance Committee, I want to extend an apology to our community for any fear or anxiety created by the committee's conversation about minimum wage and the Workers' Bill of Rights. I also want to assure both the community and the council that city staff, including the city manager and the assistant city manager, only acted on the instruction of the committee and are not responsible for any of the confusion or fear. We were compelled to have this conversation in Finance Committee because of our work on Oly Strong and the requests from struggling workers in our community. So in September, the Finance Committee discussed topics that have actually been on our approved work plan for several years, including this year. These topics are again supported by our Oly Strong plan, a plan that the council recently approved. All the issues in the Workers' Bill of Rights are intersectional to our homelessness, housing, and economic resiliency. These issues include housing security, food sovereignty, living wages, and affordable childcare. Again, all issues highlighted in our Oly Strong plan and are tied to our economic stability. In September, Finance Committee started with a scoping conversation about the Worker Bill of Rights and minimum wage. The discussion included a review of the MIT scale of livability and University of Washington's self-sufficiency standard. Both of these suggest a minimum wage for Olympia somewhere between $17 to $24 an hour. At that time, we did not discuss a specific amount that might be considered for Olympia should we seek to increase the minimum wage. The committee decided that separating minimum wage process from the rest of the Worker Bill of Rights was one of the actions. During this meeting, we also discussed a possible timeline for both the minimum wage and the Worker Bill of Rights. We then requested that staff work up these two processes, and the committee requested the study session tonight for the council to discuss these two possible processes: an escalated plan for outreach and community input on minimum wage, and a longer process for the rest of the Worker Bill of Rights. During the weeks immediately after the September meeting, we all realized that the minimum wage process required much more time and much more discussion, that a short process originally discussed did not reflect how Olympia does good policy. Yes, part of that realization was due to the concerns expressed by our small business community. The Finance Committee then called a special meeting on October 17 with the intent to readjust the whole process and clarify the conversation we had in September. During this meeting, it was discussed that a process for the entire Workers' Bill of Rights, including minimum wage, should have a thoughtful community conversation designed to discuss and develop a plan on how to improve workers' survival in our community while preserving small businesses. The committee asked again the staff to bring a preliminary plan forward, understanding that next year there's a lot of work to be done on our budget and that we're conscious of the staff time. We wanted to have in this plan to include those who might be involved in the conversation. What does sustainable minimum wage for Olympia look like? Can we address the elements of the Worker Bill of Rights? How do we improve the lives of Olympia workers? And how do we ensure preservation of small businesses while we do this work? The committee envisioned that participants in this community process would include small business owner, business association, labor organizations, workers, nonprofits, and many other community members. The committee also recommended that the Finance Committee continue oversight of this work with adequate council check-ins for continued input. The Finance Committee is excited to bring forward to Council this discussion about what a possible process looks like to facilitate a community conversation intended to develop a plan. We also believe for the last few weeks that all conversations and moments of public sharing have created a unique opportunity in our community. We believe that we are hearing from both workers and small businesses alike a willingness for a dialogue, to listen and to learn. A very good place to begin a community process on what does it mean to ensure survival of small businesses and our workers. We know that for sure Olympia has an excellent history and record on having difficult conversations, that given the appropriate open process, we will provide an equitable balance point between all involved, and the outcome will continue to make Olympia a better community. Again, as Chair of Finance, I sincerely apologize for any fear or harm this conversation caused our community, that the responsibility for any turmoil belongs with the committee, not the city staff. We sincerely believe in this conversation and that the health and resiliency of our community is tied to strong small businesses, but also a strong, healthy workforce. And we're looking forward to a conversation tonight and going forward.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Parsley, who is our chair of the city's Finance Committee. Thank you. So before I open it up for discussion with council members, I've asked Councilmember Cooper to just give us a little bit of background on and provide some context on what the Worker Bill of Rights is. And I think that's important for those who are tuning in maybe for the first time or maybe haven't been following for quite so long. So Councilmember Cooper.
Thank you, Mayor Payne. It's loud tonight. So I want to just take a second of personal privilege and back up slightly from where we are today, because for me, this conversation began in 2015 when I brought forth a referral to consider minimum wage, fair scheduling, and sick and safe leave for the city of Olympia workers. Largely that was because of the 15 Now movement was happening, and there was a statewide conversation in cities, being driven by cities, about this minimum wage and the need for growth in Washington state. And I'm proud to say, because Olympia was part of that conversation, we have the minimum wage we have now. It's a lot better than it was. And it's because of our work. It's because we joined in that conversation. We made it live, excuse me, while also realizing that there's a lot of pieces in here that may or may not be in our control. And we are a small city, and we don't like to be the first one in line at the Supreme Court, generally, right? I think the lawyer and the city manager are nodding. So I worked with the 15 Now movement to bring forth an ordinance that made it a civil penalty between a worker and their employer to look at wage, to look at safe scheduling, and then or predictive scheduling, so somebody knows what their schedule is going to be in advance of going to work, and then sick and safe leave, which we saw the state take care of the sick and safe leave portion, and the legislature, the $15 an hour minimum wage has been brought forth through an initiative. Fast forward to now, we have a request from organized labor, so specifically the United Food and Commercial Workers 367, and I always get the order of the way they say the county's wrong, the Lewis Mason Thurston.
Thurston
Lewis Mason Central Labor Council, because Rochelle Martin has a signature on this letter in front of me. So I'm really glad that I didn't just look. I should have just looked. So anyway, these two organizations literally represent thousands of workers in our community. And that's no small factor. And so I think it was very important for us to listen when we received this request. And it was also timely because the Finance Committee had already been talking about in the work plan where we could fit it into the schedule this year. It was on our to be scheduled list. And when this request came, it made sense to make the conversation live and see what it made sense to do. And so the request for the Workers' Bill of Rights as it came to us, and I want to address that I'm not putting any from this point forward in my comments, I won't be putting any opinion or other facts just from the request. But I should conclude my previous comment with the only thing that's different from 2015 to now is our workers are worse off and our small businesses are having a harder time. And so I think it's really important that that conversation carry that mantra. So the Workers' Bill of Rights, it asks for us to implement a Seattle or King County minimum wage in the city of Olympia, which is listed here as 2029. And to consider that before hiring additional workers, employers must offer the existing employees more hours before they go out and hire. That they should have stable and predictable schedules, that there's good faith estimates of hours of time at time of hiring, including anticipated shifts, that you receive 15 days notice for a schedule, that there will be predictability in that schedule. So if you don't end up getting those hours, there would be some compensation. And that goes on to get into the details. They also are asking for something, and this is not something that was on the radar in 2015, and I think has largely come about since COVID, though well, I don't want to add opinion. I said I wouldn't, but is safe workplaces. And so they're asking for employers to identify factors that put workers at risk of violence and outline methods to prevent violence. And so they talk about active shooter scenarios and kind of go into looking for solutions that we've seen play out in workplaces and schools across the country with guns and other violence. Then they're also asking for protection against unjust terminations and having universal just cause protections against termination. And then they're asking for enforcement that makes a burden of proof on employers, and it's a civil infraction between an employer and an employee, but also asking the city to consider long-term whether it could stand up Office of Labor Standards Act to monitor and work towards broader enforcement than you might get from a civil a penalty. So I think I've responded to the mayor's request without putting too much of my own opinion into it.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. So just before we get started in the conversation, I like to just frame it with, really, this is an opportunity for those of us who are not seated on the Finance Committee to share our thoughts as well on where we stand on this issue, but also in terms of maybe getting to some next steps of what that might look like for us here at the city. So at this point, we open up the discussion. Any comments from the council? I can start. Councilmember Vanderpool.
So, to me, I have a lot of time to think about this, and I feel that going forward, whatever we do, that we need to be very deliberate, that we need to have this policy written out with the involvement of the small business community and of labor, because if we don't do policy deliberately, if we don't do things in a way that ensures that the policy does what its intentions are, we're not going to create good policy. And so to me, I believe going forward, wherever this discussion leads, we need to ensure that it meets those needs. That's the thing I keep repeating to myself on this, because small businesses are not, in our community, don't have the margins that large companies do. They don't. And I don't want us to lose that in our community. But also a lot of the workforce that has contacted us, they're dealing with wage issues and income issues and scheduling issues that and health issues that have to do with certain industries and not particularly small businesses. And so when we go forward from here, as we try to work on our schedule, as we work on policy, we need to have, to me, a clear schedule, but also a clear understanding what the community's needs are. And we have our Olympia Strong work, and I want to make sure that it ties to that. So I'm just going to open up with that and allow any of my other councilmates to talk on it.
Thank you. Councilmember Madrone.
Yeah, I'll admit that as this has come forward, I've felt a bit frustrated. And I'm glad to hear some of the things that have been said this evening, kind of acknowledging, where things might have gone a little sideways. Everything that comes from our committees is a recommendation to the rest of council. And the initial proposal, with the very shortened timeline, didn't. I don't know. I think that as a council, we need to work a little bit more on our processes to make sure that we're all able to have a say in what our work plan is for the rest of the year. So I just want to start with that. And I also I struggle with the connections to the Olympia Strong plan. There was a lot of really hard work put into that plan from city staff, from many members of our community, many stakeholders, and these are not items that are recognized as strategies within that plan. So I think we need to be transparent about that, because I know that there are some folks who were really involved in Olympia Strong, who are part of our community, who are saying, wait, hold on. Why didn't I see this in the plan? Why is this coming forward now? And I'm afraid of us making this such a big priority that all of the things that we just voted to approve in Olympia Strong hit the back burner because all of our capacity gets sucked into working on this process. And, in terms of, whatever discussion we have tonight around process, I don't think we're ready to decide what moves forward, when moves forward, how long it's going to take, and how much capacity we're willing to put into it, because we have a whole work plan to that for 2025 that we need to talk about all the other priorities of the city and what we're no longer going to do because we've decided that this will be a priority. And that's not a decision that's been made yet. So I do think that we should talk a bit about what a good process would look like, and then consider that in the context of the other things that we want to accomplish in 2025. We're also, we're going to have a presentation on our budget later this evening. And, we're all well aware that we're facing some budget constraints. And, spoiler alert, one of the things that is in the budget that we are likely going to be cutting is the Office of Performance and Innovation. That is the group of staff who helped us do things like the One Community Plan and, the different types of processes that it's been talked about that will model after this one. So we really need a good sense of what our capacity is to take on something like this. So I'll just start with that. I just want to make sure that we're all working together and balancing the many things that we want to do with our limited capacity to do it, and also making sure that as we're talking about the plans that we have as a city, that they're properly being represented. Just so that we don't, I just don't want it to feel like a bait and switch with the community.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Nguyen.
So as to not repeat things from my colleagues tonight, I really appreciate, I wasn't sure how everyone was going to come into this meeting tonight, this being the very first time that this body has collectively talked about this topic. I really respect the acknowledgement given by both the Chair of Finance, Councilmember Parsley, and then also Councilmember Cooper with the context, and then more understanding about the Workers' Bill of Rights. I don't think that everyone understands those things. Something I like the direction that this conversation is going. I think it's grounded in reality. Thinking about not only honoring a a community included process and possibly a community led process with all community members that would be impacted by this. Um, and then I also think that it's realistic of like what our capacity is as a city, how much impact can we make? I think that if this is something that we do choose to go forward with as a council and have it on our agenda, which is for our work plan for next year, which is something that we would decide in our annual retreat. All of the things that we work on for that year is decided in the or in the front of or I guess in January in our annual retreat for the year. But I'm glad to see that it's not just about what is the proposed minimum wage. It is about the full workers' bill of rights. And there's a lot of work-life balance. There's a lot of just respect and like dignity. I think kind of basic things for employees in there. So I'm glad to see that moving together. We're talking about it together. Something that hasn't been mentioned so far, I guess sort of directly, and is something that's been on my mind, is that I don't want to get ahead of myself and not yet seeing the data and not yet really diving into it on this issue. But I think it's really sort of heartbreaking in a way what we're seeing right now, and whether that's intentional or not, I'm not sure. But we're seeing workers, and then small business, and then also nonprofit leaders, right? There's more people in than just the workers, and then the small businesses, right? There's also the very large businesses and just different scales, and so this actually impacts a broader community base than I think folks sort of initially realized. And we've gotten so much public comment in person, via email, phone calls, intercept. I would also say, so I think all of us have been out at meetings or at the grocery store, and people have stopped us, when we're doing things, and really kind of giving their plea as to why this is something we definitely should do or why this is something we definitely should not do. And so there's sort of like this uh workers versus everyone else thing, and who is our sort of allegiance to, where really truly it's to everyone, right? To everyone in the community, and it's a tough balance. And I sort of and to me, it's like, what is the it's not one group versus the other group. It's how do we collectively rise all boats, right? As cheesy, but also as true as that is. And for me, again, I don't want to get ahead of myself. Although making a wage change, is that it seems sort of, is that a long-term solution? I wonder about that. I wonder about groups of people that are everyday people in our community, um, trying to figure out how they can be more, I don't even want to say successful, but like be able to thrive in the community. How can they live and thrive and really like live, work, play? We always say that, right? Live, work, play. And to me, it's like, why are we not going all in on tax reform? Why are we not, this might sound pie in the sky for folks, but it's like, what are these long-term solutions? And I think a lot about that. And I don't think that it's impossible. And I just, it's really heartbreaking to see everyday people in the community almost like fighting with each other, right? For honestly peanuts to some, like, and I hate to sound, condescending in any way, but it's just like, we're all in community together. We all have different privileges. We have different, finances. But ultimately, we're already working in a system that is not setting us up for success. So, it's it's just I just I want to I want to be able to, if we do something on our work plan, I want it to be actionable. I want us to I don't want to make it such a big conversation that nothing ever happens. It's just the system in which we're working is already inequitable. And then we have people that are, again, everyday people, almost like fighting with each other. And then it's just, like, I would like to make a long-term change, and I hope that this council is open to that conversation. It's just, there's a lot of contributing factors to what makes a place affordable, to get your basic needs met, but then also it's about the bread, but it's about the roses too, right? But to enjoy being in that community, and it's not all shouldered on the employer. It's also about about housing. It's about the different taxes that the city asks you to pay. So there's a lot of different factors, and I'd like to work collectively and figure out, like, hey, what are long-term solutions so that we can all thrive. And I don't think it's too pie in the sky. And so I hope that if we decide to go this way, that you will all come and join me in that part of the discussion. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. So I guess I'll just start with this conversation around capacity for staff and going into the work plan for next year. And that concern is valid and is very real. But let's not pretend that we wouldn't be having this conversation anyway, despite this coming forward. We were going to be having that conversation anyway about capacity and what the work plan looks like and whether or not um, we move forward with certain projects and assignments for next year, and whether they could be put off into the following year and that sort of thing. So in that sense, I see this as no different. It's just another item on the list to a conversation we were already going to have at the retreat this year. And I think that it is a matter of simply looking at all of the actions within the Workers' Bill of Rights and comparing that to the totality of what we are hoping to work on for next year. And really taking a look at that and saying, well, what's doable? And I think that's an important conversation to have. And the reason I think we should start there is because of the fact that we have had community members, business owners, we've had nonprofit organizations, workers, union representatives come into the chambers and ask us to act. And as far as I'm concerned, we should be listening to all of those voices. And so we need to be taking that into account as we think about our work plan for next year. And so for me, you know, this connection to Olympia Strong, and while Olympia Strong doesn't necessarily mention minimum wage as an initiative that we would propose or that we would do, it does talk about a third of Olympians struggling. It does talk about wages and the high cost of living throughout the plan. And so this is uh, one of those, uh, and you could say that the list of initiatives under each of the four categories within Olympia Strong is not an exhaustive list. There are things that we could add to it in the future that we probably haven't even thought of yet. And so for me, I see this as no exception. I just understand that we're all frustrated with the process, and that includes myself in that. Very frustrated about it. But it doesn't mean that we shouldn't be listening to the voices that were in our chambers. And so that's how I feel about approaching this going into next year. And I really hope to continue to have a robust conversation about what a public engagement process will look like. But first, we need to understand what's the scope of work that we're going to do for 2025. And once we know that, then we can talk about an engagement process. And I think that is really sort of the order of things in that regard. So that's what I have to offer for now. And I see that Councilmember Gilman has joined us. Councilmember Gilman, can you hear us? Uh, okay. Um, Councilmember Gilman, can you hear us? Well, while you're looking for your mute button, the council is just having a conversation about, sort of where we are in terms of our positions on whether or not to take up minimum wage and fair scheduling and safe workplace conditions on the work plan for next year. And so open to hearing your thoughts if you have any to share. If you heard any of that. Can you hear us?
No, oh, you just froze. If you can hear me, I'm waiting for the internet to get strong enough so I can hear you.
I'm sorry, Councilmember Gilman, I couldn't hear you. Could you state that again?
Oh, it's the connection on my side. It's been kicking me out and putting me back in. Can you hear me this time?
I can.
Okay.
So I just wanted to let you know that we were in the middle of having discussions about our personal thoughts each on this agenda item on minimum wage and fair scheduling and safe workplace conditions. And each of us were sort of sharing our thoughts about what this looks like for the work plan going into next year. And so welcome to hearing your thoughts.
Good. Well, as I heard you state just a couple moments ago, I'm eager for us to create a more robust and inclusive process across the beginning of 2025. I'm very much in support of and interested in exploring ways that we might do both work rules, predictive scheduling sorts of rules, as well as considering an increase in the minimum wage to help fulfill the objectives of our Olympia Strong plan. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Councilmember Gilman. So yeah, I ask us all to sort of sit, with that thought in terms of what I said about the work plan and the workload going into 2025. But we have to also remember that we have a community to listen to. We have a constituency, and so we don't necessarily dictate the entire work plan. The community, it sounds like, is perhaps telling us that maybe they want us to pivot a little bit, and we should be listening. That's our jobs. And so that's my sense of how to approach this. I get that we're frustrated with our own internal processes, and that's, I think, our internal business to figure out. And in the meantime, we need to be thinking about what can we be doing in this area that's best for the community. And so open to hearing additional thoughts before we just talk about next steps for the retreat. Are there any? Mayor Pro Tem Nguyen, followed by Councilmember Cooper.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I share what I think is a share. I share your and other council members that I've heard of in this meeting and outside of it, concerned with wanting to make sure that people can be economically sound and dare I say even prosperous in this community. As far as whether or not to work on it, for me, if it's all right, I'd like to hold that for the annual retreat. I'd like to see this item with all of the other items that we feel very passionately about, and also the ongoing work, and realizing that there is our budget's going to look a little different, staffing is going to look a little different. So I hear you. I do think that we build the items on our work plan off of what we're hearing from constituents, whether that's at public comment or just out in the community. And so we bring our own passions and we bring our own kind of intels from the community to form what we would like on our work plan. And so for me, I really appreciate that space and that time to literally retreat together and discuss it. So I'm going to hold until then. I hope that that people are hearing, if they don't take anything else away, I hope that they're hearing a strong sense of care for the a responsibility of making big, really important decisions on council and how they impact, and the realization more and more of how it impacts all community members that are involved. And also, I just really respect that space that we have as a group to be able to retreat and see everything that we do. So I'll just hold it till then. Thanks.
Thank you. Councilmember Cooper, followed by Councilmember Parsley.
Thank you, Mayor. I guess I'll echo a little bit of people's frustration because I thought I was coming here to talk about a process to get to an outcome, not just talk about our frustrations. It's a little bit unfortunate, but I understand how we get there because we've had unprecedented engagement in the last couple of weeks and months about this topic. In my 13 years on the city council, there's one thing that I think we are really good at, regardless of who's sitting at that table, this table, and that's pivoting when the public asks us to. And in fact, we did a pretty significant pivot this winter around tenant protections because of initiatives that had passed in other cities. Similarly, we did a pivot to create the Metropolitan Parks District when thousands of people came and asked us to buy the LBA Woods. All things that were written lightly in work plan, a little bit of work had been done, but when it was time to pull them off the shelf and put them in prime time, they became live, just like the committee attempted to do with minimum wage. And so my frustration is actually about the desire for the work that the committee is asking for to happen sooner. This conversation started in our committee live on September 16th. And the only thing that came out of it was an engagement plan for 90 days around minimum wage and separating a conversation about all of the worker Bill of Rights. The separation was actually my idea, and I'm happy now because we put them back together because I wasn't really sure about that separation, but the separation of the wage from the rest of the Bill of the Rights. And I think going forward, it's important for us to acknowledge that the requesters see them as all the same thing. But that the separation was because there's a really good set of academic research around minimum wage. The outcomes are clear, and there's plenty of examples of communities to compare ourselves to me. So to me, that felt like a more simple public policy conversation that the committee thought at the time, 90 days made sense. Obviously we were wrong because we got unprecedented engagement. We also realized as a committee that there's a lot more legal work that has to go into the rest of this. Like where does the city's power lie? Frankly, a lot of this, as the leaders in labor and many people in the legislatures, this conversation should be statewide. Like these conversations need to be the same and congruent from one labor force to another. Unless the workers are not getting their needs met, then it's up to us to step to the plate and try to have a conversation to help them, just like we would if a group of businesses came to us. So Olympia Strong for me has always been about minimum wage. We have 10,000 households in our community that are struggling to get by every single day. And last night, some awesome work, and I'm gonna just cite it at a high level because I don't know if we're gonna get the slide tonight from Jesse, but the utility advisory committee asked for like impact on wage and work. How much time do you have to work to pay the utility bill in Olympia? And Jesse Barnum found that the minimum wage in the Olympia workforce isn't there until the 20th percentile of income. 20% of our workers aren't even or income earners because they might not be working the traditional ways, or they're under the table, are under that minimum wage. So Olympia Strong was actually because I said, let's talk about minimum wage again, and again. 2018, we decided we were going to do an Olympia Strong process because that was the way to get there. Well, we got an Olympia Strong proposal that was awesome. It went out and it beat the streets and it heard from the community about their struggles and what they were needing. Similarly, I just talked to a local nonprofit in town who's been asking people similar questions because it's important to know, just like our businesses, to know where people are coming from and what they're struggling with every single day. You know, food in our town costs as much as rent and childcare. And so I feel like the Olympia Strong was a little bit to placate Cooper. It doesn't have any systemic change in it. It has a great list of wraparound supports for individuals and workforce development. All of them are expensive. And there's most of them we will not be in the lead in. I'm just looking at you, Mayor, because the line is funny, so I'm not talking to you on purpose. It's just, I wish this was curved. And so I think it's just like, for me, that is what this conversation is. It's the systemic addition to Olympia Strong for the workers in our community. It's what the conversation has been about for me since I walked into this chambers for the first time. Now, there was a great editorial in the newspaper from a few of our nonprofit leaders. And it's interesting because I work for one of those nonprofits in my day job, and I love the fact that we're starting to agree on the data. Like, we're starting to agree on how big the problem is. And that right there is a win. A third or 43% of our community can't pay their bills. We should be talking about that every day. Like we're talking about 54% renters almost every day. So on the price side of that equation is what the editorial was about, and it was great. It talked about looking at, I think the Mayor Pro Tem mentioned this, looking at the tax equation, looking at house prices, childcare prices, food prices. You know, that's great. If somebody can write me a memo that shows me 1 or even 5 things that we could do within our power in those spaces that would be systemic, I would love to try them. I got into a debate with one of the authors of that letter right before one of our meetings recently. It was very short. And they said, well, why don't you just do universal basic income or guaranteed income or direct cash assistance for people? And I said, that would be great. In fact, if a coalition of people comes to the city council and brings that, I have a feeling that this conversation would go away and we would talk about guaranteed income for workers while also talking about some of the rights pieces that are inherent. The wage conversation, I mean, would go away. But if we want to do, I would love to be able to do this. We can't balance our budget. Maybe this would help, but guaranteed income for the 10,000 households in our community that are struggling, just for their utility bill, which we learned last night is a little over $300 every other month, would cost us $18 million just to do a utility bill. And people are talking about $500 a month, $1,000 a month in these pilots. The city of Olympia cannot do the lifts that are being proposed as the converse alternative to this conversation. I've been working on it for 13 years, and I'm not saying I'm an expert, but I would love it if somebody showed us another alternative. Now, I'll close just by talking about wage, because I think it's the most unfortunate thing is that this was taken to be some proposal that the council was making for a huge wage increase on the 1st of January. Never on the table. The $24 that was cited earlier was from, living wage studies. I threw a $20 number on the table and tried to get my colleagues to make a live number come out of the committee, and they threw it out. There was no number. It was all about a conversation. And I hope that we can commit to have that conversation with our community, because they're asking for it. They're demanding it on all sides. And have the conversation. I took a whole bunch of notes because I think they're awesome. Like, have the conversation be with the small business community, the labor community, have it be deliberate, have it talk about different industries and how they're impacted, have it talk about what the schedule will be so people know where they can be engaged, tie it to Olympia Strong, grounded in reality, have it include respect and dignity, and be data driven, and have it listen and engage our businesses of all sizes, ensure that our allegiance is to everyone. And that's a beautiful comment. Collectively, we can do this work, and I know we can. And so I ask you to roll up your sleeves, because I came here to talk about people that are struggling, not process. But I get it. And I'm used to waiting. So that's why I'm not blowing my top. And I'm really glad that we all came here to have a discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Cooper. Councilmember Parsley.
I feel like if there's a silver lining in this process is the engagement. I've sat down with small business owners. I've traded emails with small business owners. I've had phone calls with small business owners. I was a small business owner. What I'm hearing universally from all of these conversations is they want to be engaged. They see the problem. They understand the problem. They also want to be heard. And that's what a good process will give us, is all sides are heard and all sides will be at the table, and those considerations will come forward to a really good, equitable balance point that will protect the small businesses, because they are treasure and they are honestly not really the problem. Most small business owners that I've talked to told me what they did for pandemic, including one who helped everybody fill out their partial unemployment and then paid them 20 hours a week. And when they made tips, made up the difference to what they were making in tips before the pandemic, so that they were getting 40 hours a week of tips. This is the kind of small business owners we have in our town, and we need to protect them. At the same time, we have a lot of big box stores, and we seem to be hearing that we don't. Well, think about it. We've got a lot of pharmacies in town, a lot of fast food, a lot of chain restaurants, three major hospital organizations. We have grocery stores. These are corporations that are recording record profits in the 30 to 40 percentile. And yet their employees are getting simply the state of Washington minimum wage increases. And they're not being guaranteed 40 hours a week, nor are they being guaranteed what their work shift's going to be week to week. To go to the numbers that my councilmate over here said, when I ran for office in 2017, 41% of our community was at risk of losing their housing. 41%. That's 21,000 people in Olympia. That's an astounding number. 21,000. When I ran in 2020 or 2021, it was 48%. That's 25,000 people. If we're going to fix our homelessness problem, we have to stop the slide back into the street. We have to stabilize our population. We have to make this not just about surviving, but the roses. Being able to go out to a restaurant, being able to go to the movies, to buy a book, whatever the thing that makes life worth living, and not working 3 to 4 jobs just to pay rent, which I happen to know near my old business, all of the workers in that convenience store were working 3 jobs just to pay rent, because I was asking. So yes, I think the community is asking us for this conversation. Yes, we have an overfilled work budget. Plan. We have the budget. We have a budget crisis. The committee was very well aware of that. And we were compassionate to what we were telling and asking the staff. I think if we first ask the question of the process, what's the plan? What are we trying to solve? And that to me is, how do we have a healthy small business community with a healthy workforce? How do we make that happen? And yes, Ole Strong does talk about that, because it talks about housing security, food security, affordable childcare, living wages. It talks about all of these things and they are super important. So yes, I think our community is asking us for this pivot. I think they're telling us they're drowning. And I think we need to help them. And it's not just the workers, but the small businesses. And recognize what the work plan should reflect with compassion to our staff, because I think they are overworked and our budget's overworked. But understand this is, I think, a fundamental ask of our community. And I think if we can at least start that conversation, the community's here. That's the silver lining. The community's here. They want to have it. They want to engage and they want to listen to the opposite side. So we are, to parrot our mayor pro tem, we're in community together. And that's what I'll end with.
Thank you. Any additional comments? Okay, so to wrap things up, I think we need to come to some sort of consensus tonight about what going forward looks like. So I hear all of the different concerns. It sounds like, you know, some of us are you know, really thinking about capacity, you know, in terms of um, what that looks like in compared to the immense needs that obviously we're looking to address with this particular item. So my question to everyone is, from based on what I'm hearing, is it sounds like we are interested in having a conversation at the annual retreat in January. It's difficult to commit to exactly what we will do at this particular moment because we are not looking at the totality of the entire work plan for the year of 2025. So with that being said, I do think the very least we can do tonight is make a commitment that we are going to, in fact, have that conversation about what a public engagement process will look like in the context of an entire work plan and what it is that we're going to be able to do in this particular area. Any comments on that? Councilmember Vanderpool.
So I want to mention that if we create a public process, we have public forums and discussions, there may be other factors that are not in this. They may rise to the top. So for example, commercial leasing, the cost of that on small businesses may raise to the top, right? The predictive scheduling may be higher up than minimum wage. So when we do that, we also have to be aware that we may end up with a different type of package, and that may affect the amount of work that staff is doing. And so I really want to mention that, because whatever good policy we create, we need to be ensure that it involves both parties, including nonprofits.
Sure. And really that's the case with nearly anything that we do, right? As with whatever process that we have, there's bound to be changes. There is the potential for disruption or interruption based on something else that emerges that's more eminent or more that is of higher significance or importance. So that can happen with nearly anything that we do. In the meantime, though, I think we have a general understanding of what the Worker Bill of Rights says. And so we need to take that into account as we go into 2025. And as we have a conversation about the entire work plan, we're looking at the Workers' Bill of Rights, and we're going to do our due diligence in terms of what is actually doable for us. Now, that doesn't mean that we will even actually end up adopting something at all. Simply because what's on the work plan means that we are committing ourselves to doing the work of working on something to eventually introduce a policy, and then we make a decision as to whether or not to adopt it. So I just want to make that clear to all of us that are listening and watching tonight, that that is the process. There is no commitment at this point to do anything. And so I really want to be clear about that. What we are committing ourselves to doing is beginning a process of what it could look like to bring something forward to the council for consideration of adoption. So there's phases to this. So, Councilmember Cooper.
Yeah, I just wanted to help bring that out if you would let me, because I think that is what I heard the majority of the group committing to, is a conversation with the community. And so if we're going to do that, talk about what that looks like at the retreat, I'd like us to react to something real and not walk into a blank slate again, because I thought that we would be actually talking about a process tonight. That's until this afternoon was what I understood was coming to. And so, from September 3rd, when the request came in, the retreat will be, 3.5 months later. And so I hope that we can have the respect of the people that have gotten involved in this conversation to be ready when we walk into the room, whether that's at the retreat or at another opportunity in January, to look at a timeline and a process. And if I could, well, I'll speak for myself, but my takeaway from the finance committee was we didn't want to predetermine the process because we want creativity from the city council. In order to have that be flushed out by January, I just request one addition to your schedule, and that's that there's a way for Jay and Stacy to harvest from us as individuals what that process would look like in our mind, so that that work is done before we sit down.
I was getting there, and that's what I was going to suggest as well, because we have very limited time at the retreat, and we can't dedicate our entire retreat to discussing a public engagement process for this one particular agenda item. So I think that's a fair ask. What I will say is that from what I'm hearing tonight from the rest of our council mates, is it seems like they're not looking for us to have a further discussion about public engagement. Just because it's, as I said earlier, I think we need to decide what it is that we will work on before we discuss a public engagement process. A public engagement process for what? And I think that's important for us to have that conversation first. Obviously, we can talk about, well, it's for all of this, right? But if we're comparing it to the rest of the items that we have on the work plan and what's actually doable for the city, I think that's the important conversation to have first, about what we agree that we're going to take up with all of these items: minimum wage, fair scheduling, workplace safety. And once we make that decision, then we talk about a public engagement process. And that's something that I think is going to take more time. Councilmember Madrone.
Yeah, I was going to say something similar. I wouldn't want a full process to be created with feedback from all of us, and then we get to the retreat and look at the full work plan and we're like, oh, that we bit off more than we can chew. Now there's other things that we can no longer do that we had really needed to get done in the year. So I agree with the mayor in terms of, engagement with us to figure out, the what, not the how. And I also agree with what Councilmember Vanderpool was saying in terms of like, there's this workers' bill of rights that's been put in front of us, but I also heard Councilmember Parsley say, like, let's make it not just about a healthy workforce, but healthy small businesses. So I want to be cautious that we don't limit ourselves to what has been put in front of us by one party who has approached us and asked us to be engaged on this. I want us to be very, very careful about how we frame this work. I know that Olympia Strong talks about how many people are struggling in our community. And when we talk about a third of Olympians struggling, some of those people are on a fixed income, and and a workers' bill of rights does not help them. So I just don't want us to misrepresent the good work that we've done. If this is over and above Olympia Strong, like, hey, through the Olympia Strong process, we found there's some other things that we should maybe be working on, then let's say that. But I just don't want us to take the work that we're doing and say, okay, well, now it's this, because we can add things to it whenever we want, right after we passed it. So I just want us to be really careful on the framing. I'd like us to work with our economic development director to make sure we have the right data in front of us. I just, I want us to be very clear and transparent on where this is coming from, why we're doing it, and what it may encompass, so that we don't end up with the kind of concerns that we've been hearing from the community.
Councilmember Parsley.
One, I think this is great. I took notes from all my council mates, and I'm not going to summarize them for you, but I did take notes. The two things that I would like to make sure that we remember is we do have this engagement right now, and we have a momentum. And what I'm worried about is the conversation opportunities are here now. So how do we capture that? That is, I mean, the engagement is amazing. I haven't seen it since really homelessness response in our one community and everything else. The other thing is we got to recognize the Worker Bill of Rights is one of many, many, many things we have to do. It's a yes and situation. It's not a single option. It is, that's what the Olympia Strong is. It's a cafeteria of options, sort of like when we're looking for affordable housing, we're looking at, land trusts and land banking, partnerships with private, we're looking at our incentives for impact fees and multifamily tax exemptions. We're doing a yes and situation. I believe this is how we have to approach this topic. It's a multiple things. This is just one in many, many things we have to look at. And then I'm just going to say one little thing, because I have been driving at this for a while, that would be put on the part of the small businesses. I really want us to explore the potential for what does it look like for a B&O tax exemption below a certain, because that would help potentially the really small businesses be more stable, and maybe they'll push that forward to their staff and make their businesses more viable. Because of the way B&O tax is designed, which goes to tax system, thank you very much, Mayor Pro Tem, is stupid because it's based on gross and not net. So being able to go forward with someone like, that kind of full conversation. And as much as I'd like to see a baked process, I'm going to push back just a tiny bit, except for how do we capture this engagement and keep it going? Because there's a fair amount of engagement.
Thank you. And just for those who might be listening, B&O is a business and occupation tax. So, okay. Well, first of all, I just want to thank you all for the conversation on this tonight. I know that this is a sticky topic for us, and we're all in different places, and obviously we're still shaking off some of what we have understood, how this was brought forward and introduced in our internal processes, and we're moving beyond that now to a place of what we're going to do going forward. And so what I'm hearing is that we're to continue this conversation at the retreat after we have consulted the city manager and the assistant city manager with some thoughts on where we want to go with this, in specifically what a public engagement process could look like, so that going into the retreat, we could have a thorough conversation about comparing what we will do to the rest of the work plan if we come to some sort of agreement that we will take action on a particular thing. And then once we have decided what that scope of work will be, we can further flesh out what that public engagement process will be. So are we all in alignment and understanding of where we will go from here? Okay. Councilmember Cooper.
Thank you, Mayor Payne. I just want to readdress one thing, because I think you're saying if, and I'm hearing a majority of the city council say we will have this conversation with the community. So I'd like to just do a little reframe and ask the staff to come back and tell us how we can fit it into our work plan and what the impacts will be. If I could reframe your request just that way, it would make me happy.
Sure. I guess what I'm saying, when I say if, what I'm referring to is more so that we're not necessarily saying we're doing a particular thing in this particular moment. So I'm speaking very generically on purpose. So I apologize if that sounds like we're not going to do anything, but what I really mean is that we are not committing ourselves to any particular actions tonight.
That's reasonable to me, as long as we
Okay.
all acknowledge that we hear the majority of the city council saying
Okay.
this should be a conversation with the community.
Yeah.
And adding things to it, that
Yes.
there's no question that we will figure out a way to fit it in.
Yes.
Thank you.
I got you. All right. All right, so that concludes our business on item 2A. So we will move forward to our next agenda item, item 2B, which is a briefing on Olympia 2045, which is our comprehensive plan periodic update. And here to present this evening is Joyce Phillips, who is the principal planner for community planning and development. All right, so I'm hearing a request for a recess at this time. So we will go ahead and recess for 5 minutes. It is now 6:36.